Welcome back to the channel, everybody. And you know it's going to be a ridiculous video when we got my boys Jared Feather and the legend Dr. Mike Israetel here in the house to do an amazing video for you guys. There's been so much discord recently, especially in what's really the best way to train. So we're going to do a really fun segment, true or false. I'm going to say a statement and we're going to say true or false, and we're going to yap about it and let you guys know what's our opinion on some of these growth promoting principles, training principles. But yeah, specifically today we're going to do in this video mostly training principles. So there's been a lot of different theories flying around, so I think this will be a lot of fun. What do you guys think?
I'm just so goddamn tired, you know.
I understand.
To quote an excellent line from the movie Forrest Gump, I'm just tired of this war and that lying son of a bitch Johnson. I knew that would get you, Eric. Eric, has anyone ever told you have a striking resemblance to Bubba from Forrest Gump?
I get that a lot, actually.
A lot, yeah. Makes sense.
Oh. Well, that one's true.
True, yes. Yes, we're voting.
All right, so let's hop into it here. There's been a lot of talk, especially about rep ranges. So number one is going to be there is an optimal keyword. There is an optimal rep range to maximize growth.
I mean, technically, it's true.
Everybody's true. So very interesting.
It's just large.
So I'd love to hear, like, what is your guys' take on, like, if there's one optimal rep range. I'll start with, what is that range?
It's between 7 and 7.5 reps.
No more, no less.
Everything else is like people just deluding themselves because they're not tough enough.
Is the half in the stretch position or the contracted position?
Contracted. The stretch position is another nerd fad.
Yeah.
Like, okay, thanks, Mike. That was instructive. Okay, moving on to Jared and Eric for actual insight.
What do you got, Jared?
In the literature, we're coming to the conclusion 5 to 30 is pretty damn great for growth promoting, depending on what you're doing. Machine-based, compound-based, et cetera, et cetera. 5 to 30 with fairly controlled eccentrics is great. If you're doing an insane amount of control in your eccentric, obviously it's a little less than 30. If you're doing pretty forceful and pretty slow, like quick eccentrics, it's closer to the 30, or further away from 30 if it's long eccentrics.
And Jared, to your point, if you're doing very slow eccentrics with pauses in the stretch, I mean, even sets of 3 and 4 can be very hypertrophic.
100%. Yeah.
Because it's really like, it's between your 5 RM and 30 RM that the best range is. And so depending on your rep cadence, that actual weight on the bar can, shoot, under 30 reps or even under 5 if you control it, because most of the studies were done with relatively quick contractions. Also, just real quick from the science perspective, 5 and 30 are not magical numbers.
Right.
They're these very fuzzy boundaries where it's like, what kind of girl is your like bottom limit for hooking up with at the club? Well, you know what I'm saying? On a Saturday night when your boy's dressed up in his finest threads, you feel me? I'm feeling richy rich. It's only 4s and above that can get it. Is that right? 4, yeah. And then, but you feel me, if it's Tuesday and it's a slow night and I'm feeling lonely, line up the 1s, big homie. Because 1s need love too.
I feel like there's an alcohol variable in there too.
So, if I'm drunk, bro, it's right into guys.
Oh, well.
Process that 0 line, fellas.
And we're opening with a bang here. We're in there.
On a serious note, really quickly to summarize the science, you will still absolutely grow muscle doing 1 rep at a time if it's heavy. You will grow muscle doing 60 rep maxes.
For sure.
Absolutely.
For sure.
There just tends to be, here it gets sexual again unintentionally, a bulge between 5 and 30 into which, like, if you want to sort of guarantee that you're definitely just not missing out, between 5 and 30 is just real money range.
For sure.
I've got a slightly different answer, and that's probably just due to my time or attention tilt and like focus on really big ROM. I'm actually going to say 4 to 15. And the reason I say this is because, as we know, proximity to failure is a very good indicator that you're probably pushing hard enough to induce some sort of change over time. So I've now kind of come to the conclusion of if you're getting to 30 reps, it's hard for me to believe that you couldn't get 34 or 36. Now, if you're doing 8 and like you see that 8th rep, you're like, oh, that bar speed is moving way slower, and like I'm helping you get a grinder rep, like it's pretty indicative to me that you're probably closer to failure than if you get to 30 and it's like slightly slowing down, that like that 30th rep was like the absolute last one, considering you've been able to do 30. And then obviously you, especially with the time under tension I utilize, like you have to, like aerobic fatigue and other indicators might be your limiting factor and not the actual ability to like drive mechanical force. So for me, that's why I've kind of dropped that number for myself, especially in my own training. I don't think it's like a golden rule, but if you are going to be using more time under tension, like if you're getting 30 reps at a 4110 or whatever, you are doing a 6 to 7 second rep for a very long time, and I think that's going to be more, you're going to get to failure maybe due to just aerobic reasons versus actual muscular failure. So that's my take. 4 to 15, but I think there's no there's no reason that you can't do 18 reps and still have a great set.
Yeah. I'll say 2 things on that. I think that's really wise. To your point, I think, especially like in many exercises above 20, I'm going to have to see that set, big homie.
Yeah, 100%.
Because there's a lot of ways to send it in, like where it's not really that hard.
Well, that's why I
and
said
you're just kind of
depending on what
stopping.
machine, compound,
Yeah.
et cetera.
And so to your
some
point,
machines you can do 30.
to your
lateral
point,
raise machine,
that actually like the rep ranges are proxies for load,
yeah,
and
100%.
they're proxies for time spent generating tension, which itself is a proxy for load. And so the reality is that depending on the exercise, you're actually going to see some rep ranges be much less effective. For example, sets of 30 in the squat are brutally effective for growth. It's just not really sustainable because you're just going to vomit blood after a few of those and never come back. The systemic fatigue from doing that week in and week out is just like, if you can handle it, you could have been 2 times more jacked if you just did not fatigue yourself like that for no reason. So anything above 10 reps actually in the barbell squat is starting to be pretty fucking cardio. On the other hand, wrist curls, calf raises, sets of 35 and 40 is really the same amount of time spent generating tension as like a set of 12 on lat pull downs. And so that's well within the range. And so I'd say like 4 very small amplitude movements, very low rep, like low range of motion movements inherent to the muscle and the joint. I think higher reps are totally tenable. The other good thing about doing high reps for those types of exercises is, very low rep calf raises, kind of scary.
Yeah, no, I think that's that's a great point. I think that's one that's like, I think there's so much that's now like, it gets oversimplified, right? It's like if you're doing anything above 8 reps, you're like literally wasting so much time. You're inducing more fatigue. But like I'm not going to do a set of calf raises for like 4 reps with like 14 plates in the leg press. Like absolutely
Nonsense.
not. No, thank you. So I think there is obviously nuance there to the muscle group you're targeting, and also to your point, an eccentric load on like a deep leg press. That distance is just so far. So your probably reps are going to take so long. So like even a set of 4 like hard reps on a leg press at a like that type of tempo can still be super growth promoting, especially if like reps 3 and 4 are just like grinders. You're barely like that sled's going up super slow on 4.
Yeah.
I think you're doing a lot with that. Whereas like you said, great point. I personally would never do
Set of 4
calf
set of
raise,
4
like,
on wrist curls. People are like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Dragging out the 120s for wrist curls. Another one to me, now that we're on rep ranges real quick, if you don't mind, Eric, is theory's dope and it's the foundation for everything you do, but it intersects with the nuances of practice in ways that are sometimes like you just have to discover over time. But as you discover them, parts of your body fall off because you experimented in the wrong direction. And one of the time savers that I think we can communicate to folks listening is for shoulder work, especially side delt, lateral raise type stuff, I just wouldn't really go below 10 reps very often, especially in a first set, Because you have all sorts of ideas about 6 to 8 reps grows muscle, but your glenohumeral joint, as I've understood through MRI scans, is made exclusively of just vaginas all sewn together, like centipede style.
Yeah.
That's pretty sexist.
It's pretty. It is very
accurate.
sexist. And I just want to be on record as saying, like, I absolutely do not
could've said
believe
that,
in
like-
gender equality. My dominatrix makes it very clear that men are inferior and that I have to be on my knees all the time to admit that, which I love.
You could have said like it's like built up of like a conglomerate of like worms. That could just
I mean, if I
fall
like
apart
listen,
in a
let's
second.
cut the ladies some slack. If I said it's made of testicles, it doesn't make it any tougher.
Nah.
Like, it actually hurts a lot more then.
That's true. That's why-
Basically,
that's why
there's
they burn
like,
so
yeah. So I should have said this: the outside capsule of your glenohumeral joint is made of sewn together vaginas, but the internal ball and socket joint is actually a testicle, and so incredibly soft, incredibly useless
So your shoulders is having sex at all
with
times.
itself.
With sex.
But painful sex.
Testicles in the
But
vag.
honestly, there is a real point there, and it's like lateral raising, the 80s and shit, is excellent TikTok vibes, but it is not a sustainable way to train. And you might want to do sets of 10, 15, and even 20 for a lot of shoulder stuff because, listen, pimp, it's not going to work out well for you if you do low reps. Here's another one. Bicep curls. Eric, you trying to do a set of 5 fresh on barbell curls? Like, I got bicep attachments to worry about. I want my shit put together instead of torn apart. Overhead behind the neck tricep extensions for sets of 6. Like, really?
Which leads us perfectly into the next question, which has been getting tossed around ad nauseum on Instagram, TikTok, basically saying after 8 reps is just it's just a waste of time, and at that point, once you get to 8 reps, you should inherently just increase the weight, regardless of exercise, regardless of muscle group. So, what do we think on that? True or false?
Yeah. Well, I've got these cards.
Mega false.
Mega false. So,
Mega false.
what do you think about? What's your thought process on that, Jared? Because I know you're a strong guy. So, like, I've seen you do sets that are low, like 5 to 8 on, like, let's say that camel bar press. Where's the nuance then fall of, like, do you get to 8 on that exercise and say, like, it's time to overload, or is that not very important?
It depends on how I'm doing it. So with heavy compound stuff, especially when you're talking about presses, if I'm massing up, I generally stick with that 7 to 10 range, somewhere in there, 6 to 10 range, depends. And because, like you mentioned, with our control on the eccentrics and things of that nature, that's still quite a bit of quote-unquote time and attention. You're getting a shitload out of it. If I'm doing down sets and I dip below that 6, let's say, the load comes down. So it's not like it has to be in the 8, 7 to 10 range or whatever. But if I'm like dieting down and I'm doing some heavy compounds and I'm deep into prep, I'm still using the same control, all that stuff. I'll use some of the same exercises, but I might bump the rep range up intentionally, lower the load intentionally, and move more into that 10 to 15. So it's not like you have to stick in the lower rep ranges with heavy compounds either. It's just ridiculous to say that.
Yeah, my biggest thing with folks that say that anything above 8 reps is a waste of time is 2 things. One of their more valid critiques is that it's more fatiguing. They're correct about metabolic fatigue, but they're incorrect about joint and connective tissue fatigue. If you competitively powerlift, which I used to do, I wasn't good at either, you realize that, like, there's only so many sets of 5 you can do until you fucking break in half. And then when powerlifters and weightlifters, who typically do low reps, want to put on size, they do sets of 10. It's just curious, right, that the strongest people in the world are like, no, high reps are better for this because they're more sustainable. And the other criticism of that view of, like, anything above 8 reps is a waste of time, if we've squashed that at least the stimulus to fatigue ratios, though different, roughly even for higher and lower reps, is that it is just objectively false on direct experimental grounds. That there are like 10 studies that have compared rep ranges, and all of them show that on average, all of the rep ranges work almost identically for growth. So when you say, like, anything above 8 reps is a waste of time, like, it's like saying that no car can drive you to the store except for a Toyota Prius. Like, but I can get into a car that's not a Toyota Prius and go to the store, and I YouTubed it. How is it possible for you to still say this? You know what I mean? Like, nuance is dope where you're like, well, I think the stimulus to fatigue ratio isn't as great at higher reps. It's a wonderful discussion that's very fruitful and complex. But when people say, like, anything above 8 reps is a waste of time, it's just one of these things where it's like, but what? How? Almost every IFBB pro trains now in a 10, 15, 20 rep range.
All the gear, bro.
Oh, sorry, that's right.
Yeah.
All the naturals train with sets of 3, and they're huge.
They're huge. And I think those are all great points. I think the biggest thing that we don't touch on in this is like it's always about like what's going to build the most muscle, but it's never really discussed what are those different downstream effects from like trying to build as much muscle as possible. And sure, like you can lift 4 reps, but like I'm not going to have my 70-year-old dad go in and try to like stack 4, like, get to like where he's at fucking grinder rep at fucking 3,
Welcome to the pain, Dad. Am I in jail?
So I think that's it's there's so much nuance to this, and I think for a beginner, maybe that's good advice, right? Like, cause like they don't really understand maybe, the nuance of how close like proximity to failure. So like if you just say like within reason, decent like form, that if you're getting to 12 reps, yeah, maybe good to progressively overload, maybe get down closer to 8. But I think there's this whole like now like 4 to 8, that's it. You can only ever do that rep range. I think that's just completely bullshit. Honestly, it's just there's so much more nuance there, and if we just continue to get to these points where you just try to oversimplify literally everything when it comes to a like immensely unique experience based on goals, age, so many different factors, previous injuries, like femur length, like all of there's so many things that you would start to consider as a high level coach when formulating a program for somebody, that if you're like, if you have an online coach that gives you any more than 8 reps, they're stealing your money. You're like,
Jesus Christ. There's a quote on that, Eric. I forget who it said, one of the famous super smart scientists. Mm-hmm. Make things as simple as you can, but no simpler. Like once the simplicity starts to be wrong, you have oversimplified.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so I think that leads us into the next question, which is eccentric loading causes unnecessary fatigue that only limits mechanical tension and thereby growth.
I'm going to flip the
Jared's getting the lightsaber out.
I'm going to flip out on this one for sure. Okay, guys, I'm tired of this shit.
Tired.
I've seen way too many smart people.
I'm gonna sit back and let him.
It really annoys me. It's like, so this is like the passive tension zealots, the passive calcium leakage zealots. I've actually discussed this shit with Mike because it was pissing me off so much online.
I get a few angry DMs from Jared every now and again.
Dude, I'm seeing way too many smart people talk about this, and I don't know where they're getting it from because in none of the studies have we exceeded calcium leakage of above 10 to 50 times, which is what it requires, which is usually seen in extreme muscle trauma, and it's seen in like excessive overloading from really ballistic exercising. That's the only way that can happen. Controlled eccentrics, like something far beyond like typical resistance training, is how that would happen. You can't have extreme calcium leakage. You need some amount of that because you actually get in passive tension, in the eccentric control, you get an amount of calcium signaling that activates like focal adhesion kinase. It activates mTOR, which everybody knows what mTOR is. Well, at least on some base level. And this is why it pisses me off.
If you're going to pretend to science, you better pretend to know what mTOR is.
Exercise metabolism is the biochemistry of how muscles work, and is especially in regards to nutrition, and that's like my master's degree. And I went through every fucking paper possible on this shit. So when I saw this like trend coming to fruition, I was like, where the fuck are they getting this from?
Can you explain why? Can you explain calcium leakage to the viewer and
they're saying
why it's detrimental?
They're saying
at a certain point.
Sure, like it can damage the sarcomere, right? Like it can, if you have extreme muscle trauma, that excessive calcium leakage just is a typical response. It's not even that it's that itself. It's a typical response in something of an extreme amount of damage to your tissue. So it can damage the muscle fiber itself too. So it's like, yeah, sure, but that's not happening in typical resistance training, especially under controlled eccentrics. It's like extreme overloading with extreme ballistic movement.
Insanely high volumes to unaccustomed individuals.
100%. That's how it can happen. And that's where you run into like rhabdo and shit like that.
Sure.
But that's not happening with the way we're training. And I don't know where in the fuck it came from. Like, guys, what are you talking about? Please, somebody respond to this. I don't care. Make a response video. Like, tell me I'm wrong. But no studies have shown a 10 to 50 times increase in calcium leakage, which is, again, is good. Some calcium leaked into that area is good for the activation of growth promoting pathways. It's just nuts, man. I have no idea where the fuck it came from.
So, I mean, and I agree with you, but what is your thoughts on like fatigue buildup to the point where it's limiting mechanical tension, meaning like the amount of force we're able to drive in that concentric phase is what the argument is that it's the only
Mechanical tension is also two-part.
Correct. So, but I think the insinuation, I agree with you, is that the only real like type 2 fast twitch fiber recruitment, which is highly obviously associated with building muscle, that it only is activated in the concentric phase.
What?
No, that's insane.
Like that's just literal make believe. It's insane. It's beyond any measure. This is false on so many levels. It's difficult to fucking put into words. So first of all,
They're regurgitating each other and then adding one little tidbit of what they think is science.
Next
like,
make
you're not
believe
actual
point.
scientists. I'm tired of this
It's
shit.
so wild. Like for a long time, we speculated based on some decent inference that the eccentric was actually much more hypertrophic than the concentric. We're back now to a more balanced view of that it's either a little bit more hypertrophic or roughly equivalent to the concentric. There is no body of literature that demonstrates that the eccentric is not hypertrophic. That's backwards. It's insane. Another thing is that you spend less neural drive generating identical forces in the eccentric versus concentric.
Especially in disadvantageous positions.
100%.
Which is what I was going to say with mechanical tension. It's the internal force of the muscle. It's
for
not
sure.
just producing a shitload of force on the concentric phase.
And so, like, because you spend less neural drive getting the same forces, and because we know that the eccentric causes at least as much muscle growth as the concentric, there's an argument backwards for stimulus to fatigue.
100%.
That if you ride out the eccentric, it's like less neural fatigue for the same amount of muscular growth. And is there a point there that excessive damage can limit hypertrophy? Absolutely.
Ragdoll.
But that you just do fewer sets, motherfucker.
Yep.
And that's it. And if you really think, that the concentric saves a ton of fatigue, and over the long-term course of a program, if you eliminate the eccentric, that you can get better growth, I would absolutely love to see a controlled study. It's actually very simple experimental design.
Yep, you do this.
There are lifts that are tailored to this. The deadlift. Up only, drop the bar. Up only, drop the bar.
Smith machine.
100%. That's right. You throw the bar and catch it when it's coming back down slow. You can do this, and in fact, much of the literature on accentuating the eccentric has seen bigger hypertrophy, bigger strength gains, specifically in the faster twitch muscle fibers.
100%, yep.
For the love of God. Sometimes myths come out of the ether that kind of fucking make sense on first pass, even though they're wrong. This is one of those that's literally backwards. I just do not understand it.
Yeah, and this one's been a tough one for me because like I built my whole physique off of eccentric loading, like especially in like the argument is like, oh, you built all your muscle before when you were training more like a bro, and like you do all this stuff for Instagram and you don't actually train like this.
Do you like when people make up your history for you?
I love it. Yeah, that's my favorite. And also that now it's the only reason I'm able to train like this is because of the gear, and it has nothing to do with my training efficacy.
It's a limitless excuse.
So then now. And even for me, guys, so I want you guys to understand, I think it's an important note is that even somebody at my level, I'll still get in my head because I'll see something like this and I'm like, I'll be doing one of my super slow unilateral eccentrics and it feels like my lat's gonna rip off the joint, and then I'm like, oh wait, now I'm just creating unnecessary fatigue because I can only drive I can only drive hypertrophy in the concentric phase, and then it even messes with my head. But I will tell you it has been the biggest game changer for my physique, the people I've shown it to, the people I coach. And it's not so, and it goes back to the point of, okay, growth promoting, but also it's therapeutic. People watch me train, they're like, it seems like you're it's meditative because you don't listen to music. I'm like, yeah, it's I was at the gym, I competed in a bodybuilding competition. And 3 hours after I was at the gym, and it wasn't because I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna get fat. I was like, I'm so looking forward to go working out with Usain, meet TNF, go work out, have a great time. And it had nothing to do with me being oh my God, I'm gonna lose muscle if I don't train. It was literally for the love of it. And I think that this type of training and having my joints feel so good that even depleted, pretty water restricted, I went in And like I did my first set of like super stretch. I put a yoga block behind my back, like plate loaded press with 2 1/4, and my joints all felt great. My shoulders felt great. But I think it's a testament to the training because you get those other ancillary benefits outside of just like what's the most growth promoting. Whereas I can tell you if I just went 4 to 8 reps on the bench press for the last like 6 years, like I feel like first of all, I probably have torn both pecs by now, but I also feel like my everything would hurt because that's how I used to feel. 100%. And now I go to the gym like kind of water restricted. You'd think my body would feel like trash after a full prep, and it was like one of the best workouts I've had in like months. So I think it's just really understanding there's a difference between, okay, is it just the most growth promoting, but also like what's going to keep you coming back to the gym, keep you coming back healthier? Because if you have an injury that keeps you out for 3 months, just because you kind of keep everything in that 4 to 6 rep range, obviously it's going to be very detrimental to your ability to grow over time.
Dude, there's a pretty interesting discussion for a while and has been in the rehabilitative literature and practicing space that eccentrics are uniquely beneficial for rehab and for injury prevention. Jared, you went through Quinn's course. You guys learned that. And so when people say like, oh, eccentrics are bad, I'm like, they're actually like better in ways that we're barely even understanding. Like if someone said, and I mean this, if someone said the concentric is a waste of time, even from direct literature, I can say that that's wrong. But I would say like, that is a lot better of a point than to say the eccentric. If you're going to attack anything as being not worth it, bottom of the stretch eccentric phase is the absolute most backward shit. Eric, if I told you, you can only get 1/4 of the total rep. So concentric and eccentric, that's half, right? And then we split those into top end, bottom end, right? So into quarters. If I told you can only pick 1/4 of a rep to do for the next 8 weeks, would you not pick the bottom half of the eccentric phase?
100%.
Look, fuck.
You know me. I'm the king.
We're all cracked out on the shit. But we didn't arrive to it because of vibes. We arrived to it because we tried it in our training. We tried everything else. And we were like, dude, like where in the leg press do you have the biggest eyeball emojis about feeling your quads? The bottom half of the eccentric, god damn it. That's it. Can you imagine two groups of people? One group is told they can only train concentric only with the top half of the concentric, avoiding both the terrible stretch and the terrible eccentric, and the other group is bottom half of the eccentric. Who is going to at least feel their muscles more? Come on. Who's going to get more growth? We already know it's going to be the fucking group that does bottom half of the eccentric. Like, again, like myths come and go. Some of them have reasonable assumptions behind them. This one is just folks on Instagram got down run out of shit to make up, and they just started going to nonsense shit. 100%. Fuck it, I'll make some shit up. I live in metropolitan Detroit, and I got to tell you guys, it's great. Real estate values are great. People are great. We just have one big problem. Dragon attacks are completely out of control. Eric, they fly in out of nowhere with their 6 limbs and fire breathing. You took my dog last week. They returned her.
This is how this works, right?
Yeah.
Completely. Eric, did you know that dragons are like really prominent in Detroit?
I've heard that and lots of especially in his area.
It's a fact.
Lots of white people too. Yeah. We took Phil there, and we were a little concerned. We took Phil into the grocery store, and everybody was kind of just like,
"What the fuck are you doing in our country?"
Well, that's it, man. It's just a bunch of people were dirty each other.
Phil was like, "There's not many minorities here." I was like, "No, there's not."
And then Phil was like, "Also, the dragons are at least a nuisance. This fucking dragon burned my lawn last week, and you're not allowed to kill them because they're endangered."